G'day guys and welcome. We've got a Subaru Forester behind us, my daily car, and the brakes are kind of lacking, so I thought let's do a 4-pot and also a 2-pot upgrade. So the fronts are the 4s, the 2s are in the rear. Now these are off a GD WRX STI, so they're actually pretty common. You can find these for about $500 in Australia. I got these for 400. They're not in the best condition, but look, the benefits are like 4-pot brakes. In a heavier car like this, the Forester, the single sliding calipers are just useless. So this is a really nice upgrade. It looks visually more compelling, and also the stock 16-inch Forester wheels will not fit if you put these on. So you have to buy something with the correct offset. Anyway, let's get started.
Okay, step 1, with your front caliper, there's 2 large nuts you have to remove. Use a bit of force. Once you take off the caliper, you can use a bungee cord so the brake line isn't held on with any force. And then we go to the next step where there's a brake rotor, which is pretty hard to get off, so you should use 2 10mm bolts or 12mm, I don't know which one it was, and that will take off the brake rotor. As you can see, the WRX rotors on the right are actually larger than the original SF ones. The rears are vented on WRXs while they are not on the original SF rotors. There's 2 nuts to remove the brake line and a clip on the suspension. As you can see, pretty easy to take off, but if you are going to take off these brake lines, please use a flare nut rather than just a normal spanner, because it's very easy to round these, and as you know, it's already been a nightmare for me since somebody's already done that to this car. Take off the brake line. I just held the caliper against where the original bolts were. It made it easier. You can just take off the brake line before you take off the caliper, but it doesn't really matter. Let all the fluid leak out. There's no point really trying to save it because this job can take around about half an hour, so you're going to lose all your brake fluid no matter what. Then the WRX rotor goes on. Put the 4-pot on. It just slides straight on. The front is just a direct bolt in. Get those finger tight, and then we're going to put our brake line on first and then tighten it completely. Don't forget, these are the copper washers, very important. As I explained before, one goes on the left, one goes on the right, so they just crush together, as you can see. And now be very careful, don't try and round this will be a disaster. Just make it finger tight and then use a spanner to tighten that brake line together. And once that's done, we can then tighten up the brake caliper. Reattach the brake line bracket on the suspension. You can use a hammer to get this on. It can be a bit of a pain. Just try to be gentle and tedious with it. And now we can see our 4 pots are attached. Everything is tight. Make sure that nothing's rubbing together. You don't want the brake line to be causing any hassles. That's the fronts done. Now for the rears. I do find this a bit more of a hassle, there's a bit more to it, but it's just nuts and bolts, so in general it's not that bad. I do recommend take off the brake line first before the actual caliper. I found it out the hard way that it could be a pain taking off that nut for the brake line. That goes off. Once again, you might have to use some 10 or 12mm bolts to take off that rear rotor. It can become pretty sticky after many years of service. And that will just pop off eventually, and then that will slide off. Now, in most cases, you might have to adjust your handbrake. So as you can see, this is the handbrake adjuster here. You just flick it up or down to make it loose or tight. In my case, I didn't have to actually change it, surprisingly, but if you have to, that's where it is. You can access it from the back. At this point, get a chisel and a hammer and start taking away that dust shield. That will be in the way, so you have to get rid of it or else it's not going to fit your rear rotors. Like I said, they are bigger and they're vented, so that needs to go. Consider it a bit of weight reduction for the day. Then slide on the rotor to make sure it fits right. At this point you can see if it's not moving or not. That could mean the handbrake is too tight. Here's our rear adapter bracket. It's pretty easy to put on. It's just 2 bolts onto the rear. Now I'm using some special type of bolts that came with this kit. You don't have to use them, but it's just recommended. Put this piece of kit on the caliper first, and then it's going to slide onto where the original mounting points were. Now don't forget copper washers, same principle. Put it over and around the brake line. Then you can slide on the whole assembly. It makes it pretty easy. It's just 2 more bolts, and then tighten all that together. Remember, that adapter bracket is where the original mounting was, so it just makes it work effectively. Now, in this case, I didn't have to move the brake line clip, but it's recommended you do, just so you don't rip anything. And that is how you do it. It's the same for both sides, and it's a big difference. Now, just remember, you need to have your bleed nipples on the top. If it isn't, it's not going to bleed air out, and you're going to have issues with your brakes. So just remember that, guys. I messed up the first time, but after that, put in your brake fluid and then bleed the brakes, and you should be good to go.
Well guys, thank you very much for watching. So these 4 pots have now been installed. This is one of the best modifications you can do onto a Forester. Even on a WRX, it doesn't have the 4-pot brakes. Because number one, you get much better braking. Number two, visually it looks cool. The only downsides are you have to get wheels that have the right offset, but and then again, it's like they're going to look nicer wheels. You want to upgrade your stock ones anyway. The braided line's definitely something I wish I could do today, but unfortunately, because people have rounded the previous nut, I can't do it. Anyway, thanks for watching. Leave a like and subscribe. Hope this has helped you out. It's pretty simple and easy. Take care. Adios.
Okay guys, I've just released my first podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Please have a look at it. The Ludicrous P Blader talks about all the crazy adventures with cars, automotive, or true stories, a good laugh. Listen to the first episode, and if you guys like it, consider following and liking and leaving a review on my podcast.